Well, hello everybody down there in South Australia. I'm John Robertson again, and I've got a very happy message for you. Excuse me for laughing, but it is a very happy message. I'm going to run for governor. Now you might think that's crazy, but it's not. The Premier of South Australia selects the governor, and at the coming election I'm putting it forward that people should vote for the parties and the electors, not the electors, the campaigners, who say they'll nominate me for governor. Right, now why would you want to nominate me for governor? I'm over here in England, and how did you ever hear of me? And if you did hear of me, you must probably saw me angry, because I have been angry on a few things. But I've got a vision for South Australia, and the vision is full employment and a state pension for old people. Now how do you think we're going to do that? Well, I'll tell you. It's with the money solution. Now, a long time ago, in fact it's 40 years ago, Bob Turner in the tax department told me how the banks create money. And I, like anybody else at that time, could hardly believe it, that they just create the money out of thin air. But they do. It's called high gearing, and a lot more people know about it now. But they lend out a lot more money than they've got. And there's a lot of criticism. You see a lot of criticism from people that say, oh, the banks, they're this and that. But I think they're great. It's good business. And I've studied their system, and after I looked at it a lot, instead of complaining about it, because where does that get you? I thought, gee, I'll copy them. And I did. And that's how I got started into exporting. And in a very short time, I built up a lot of capital, because I lent money to my clients paid me fees, I went opal mining, and put it all together, I finished up with bulldozers and low loaders and spare houses, and and then like a bolt of lightning the tax department changed their mind. But I did learn how to copy the banks. And what happened was that Gough Whitlam won in '72, in December '72, and as one of the tax guys, one of the good tax guys, David Hurd, said to me, the worms have come out of the woodwork. And he was talking about the nasty guys in the tax department. He said they're flexing their muscles, and you've got no hope now. They know Canberra won't stop them. And these, I'm not going to get angry, so I won't, but these people that are the nasty ones in the tax department just reassessed all of our exporting claims and disallowed all of our claims, and I was out of business. But luckily for me, and this is a good luck story, luckily for me, the financing side was going well. I'd learned how to copy the banks, and I was able to give, all my companies were able to give $100,000 of credit on 6 months to our American customers. So I built up really my third business. The first one was manufacturing, which I haven't told you about, and there's no point going back that far. And the second one was the exporting. And all of this is to do with creating money out of thin air. And I'll jump ahead to the point that that's what South Australia can do. You just create it. Just boom, and it's created. And I've done it 3 times as a private individual. Now, the first time was with my first export consulting business. And then the second time, I started all over again. And this time, instead of exporting opal, we set out to export sheepskin car seat covers. And this was going like a real beauty. And I made arrangements, and so did John Constas, who used to be the financial director of IPEC in those times. Both of us were able to give $1 million of credit to our customers. So we were set to have a very big market in the States. And it was all creating money. I won't say we created our money out of nothing. We had to mortgage our houses and put guarantees up and so forth, but just the same, we were able to high gear about 10 to 1. In other words, we had 100,000, we could lend out $1 million. And that's all the banks do. Now, I did it the second time, and that was with Robert Simmons and his group of clients. And what do you think? Those tax guys struck again. And you wouldn't believe it. Because Fraser and Anthony had said there'd be export incentives for exporters to get the country going again. And they turned around and knocked all our claims out again. Well, we'd put in so much effort, and Constance and Simmons and I all put up our houses, so we lost our houses. So it's not all fun. But just the same, it's taught me everything. Now when it comes to what South Australia could do, South Australia only needs to scrap all of its existing taxes. That's all local government taxes and all state taxes. Just scrap the whole lot. They're all over 100 years old. I mean, they dreamed them up before we had motor cars. And customs duty, oh, of course, customs duty is a federal matter, but there's no need for that either. You've got the very simple debit tax. The South Australian government and the federal government both tried it about 15 or 20 years ago. And it was not a popular tax because it was some fiddly little thing that was just a nuisance. And they dropped it. Now they might have dropped it because they saw how powerful it could be. Because why have a goods and service tax? I know that's not a state tax, but why go to all the trouble of recording all your sales of products? And like in America, they've got state taxes and they've got federal taxes, and every invoice you get plus state tax. And over here in England, everything you get plus VAT. And they've got to calculate it all out. It keeps a lot of people employed, but what a waste of time, what a waste of national effort. All they have to do is be like a casino. A casino lets you come in, and if you win or if you lose, they don't care. They just take 1% or whatever their percentage is off the top. You just take the money off the top. And it's just on the turnover. Now, that's all the tax needs to be. Just take a small percentage of the turnover. And then you don't need a tax department, you don't need local taxes. All you have to do is collect about 1% on the debits and the credits of everything going through the banks and the finance houses, and you have more tax collected than they'd know what to do with, because they'd be collected from all the crooks that dodge their tax at the present time. And they'd be collected from everybody else. It would be important to tax everybody, including old age pensioners, invalid pensioners. Doesn't matter who you are, everybody pays 1%. But with the pensioners, there's so much money would start to come into the kitty that there's no doubt the state should give a pension. Now this is a bit outlandish, you might think, but it'd be easy to do. Whatever a person gets from the Commonwealth, you could say, oh, well, you're going to have 20% from the state. So a fifth of what you get extra, that's your bonus for living in South Australia. Don't go doing what you're doing now, advertising to get the pobbies to come over. Put the ads over here and say, come over to South Australia. I mean, I'm sure you get some English people over there having seen those good ads. But no need to do that. You can get the Aussies to come there. I don't know if any of you remember, but old Joe Bajolki Peterson, he scrapped death duties, and everybody rushed up to the Gold Coast. Now, the Gold Coast boomed, and then everything else boomed, and he was no doubt that the old Joe was a wizard, and he knew how to get all the money to go from Melbourne to Surfers Paradise. Now, South Australia could get all the money from all around Australia coming into Adelaide. Not everybody would take the trouble to shift to Adelaide, but there's nice wineries there and nice hills and everything. You know all the nice things about Adelaide. And if there was a state pension and you could attract the old folk, then there'd be a big industry start to grow. Now at the present time, South Australia's industry is 66% a service industry. Now, you know, in the olden days, it was a primary producing state, and then it was manufacturing, and that's when I had a manufacturing business. And now it's a service. It's a service industry. You've got restaurants and you've got tourism, but there's no much manufacturing and primary production left. So let's face it, be a service industry. Start looking after all the old folk. And as they come in with all their money, and they come in with their Commonwealth pension, give them a sweetener, you give them a state pension as well. Now, with the turnover tax, you don't want the money to just stay idle somewhere. And once a person has got a fair amount of money, they only want so many cups of coffee and so many whatever they want. Everyone can only spend so much. If you've got old age pensioners and other people, but spending their money to live, and maybe they live a little bit better, but they're spending their money. And every time they spend their money, they've got to pay some tax. The person that gets their money pays a bit of tax, and that person pays it on to the next one, and they pay a bit of tax, and they pay it to the next one, and they pay a bit of tax. It's called a cascading tax. And those that have looked at it on modelling arrangements and so forth, it's sort of indicated that it looks like each transaction moves about 17 times. So 1% really is about 17% because it makes a lot of moves. Now, most of you must have heard that money was made round to go round, but of course that's where it's all got bogged down. It doesn't go round, not enough anyway. Now, with this whole system, you want the money to go round, and you need poor people to be spending their money to live, and give them a bit more so they can spend a bit more. And everyone's going to boom, because there's all the people that got to look after those. They've got to feed them and give them shelter and whatever. So you don't treat the old people as a burden. They're your gold mine, and you fetch them into the state, and the state would have to boom. It would have to boom. Now they're not the only ones. The other thing, there'll be plenty of money to do it, is to have free universities. Now they've been free in Australia before, only there's such a stupid arrangements going on down there now that the university fees are going up and up and up, and people wonder whatever they're going to do, and they're just as bad over here in England. But there's no need for that. If the universities were free in South Australia to all Australians, I'm not suggesting that you'd give free universities to the overseas students that come into Adelaide, but they could be free for all Australians. So you drag in some students. So you bring in the students, boost the business, that's a state business. You bring in the old folk, boost the business. Now all the middle of the road people will be very, very busy looking after those two groups. And of course, the old people would be well looked after, and the students are the future. Now that's just that part, and there is no doubt it can be done. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. I've been talking about this sort of thing since I first thought of it, which was in 1990. It was at the end of 1990, and I sent something off to Paul Keating. He was the treasurer then. And I sent it off to the universities, and I expected to hear great applause. Like a week later, it was before emails, I had to mail them all out, and nothing came back. And I've been yakking about it ever since. And it's too big for the politicians, because they only try to win their election for the next term, and none of them are game enough to have a go at it. And then of course you've got people like Murdoch and Packer that are making multi-millions. In my view, under this system, the tycoons would make even more, because if all the little guys are making a bit and the bigger ones make a bit more, and it keeps on going up the ladder, those at the very top will be making that much more. But I think they're too thick to see it that way. or else they haven't been told. But I'm not the only one talking about a debit tax. I wasn't even the first one to think of it, because when I did think of it in 1990, I'd raced down from Queensland down into Melbourne. I saw the politician in Frankston, Frank Ford, and he said, we always thought the same thing. And he came from small business, and he'd actually been elected into Frankston on that ticket. So I only thought of it in about November 1990. But so those guys must have thought of the idea a bit before that. So I can't take the credit. I'd like to, but I'll take the credit for being the first one to think of running for governor to put it on. Now, I'll just switch on to the law, and I only want to say that with the problems I've had